let's per transition right to the podcast. Talking Toastmasters with Angela Nuss. That is your podcast.
Yes,
you've
sir.
been going at 2 years, which is incredible. I knew you had it in you. You do a great job. Your numbers are getting better, which is always impressive to see.
Thank you.
You are very on top of it. A lot of people with podcasting quit after only 2 months because they know how much work it is. But no, you stick with it. You know, you have constant guests. You have a process down. So talk to me about. Let's actually start with Toastmasters before we can actually get into the podcast. Toastmasters, international organization. From what I understand is it's an organization kind of helped for public speaking more than anything else. So kind of give fill in the blanks there. What Toastmasters is as an organization and how you got involved.
Awesome. Thank you. Toastmasters is an international nonprofit organization helping people become better communicators and leaders. That's my version of what the whole official thing is. You can go to toastmasters.org to get the official thing, but that's essentially what it boils down to. Public speaking, stage fright, people who might need to make presentations for work. One of my neighbors growing up, she joined. She used to be a very fast talker, and she has slowed her rate of speed down considerably and is way better. And it's funny because we were riffing the other night, just chatting, riffing, during our meeting at our break. And I was like, I said something and she's like, I talked slow, didn't I? I was like, yeah, but even if you talked fast, we've known each other since we were 5. I'm like, even if you talk fast, I will still understand you because I've known you that long. But you make friends, you get to meet colleagues. There's corporate clubs. Most of them are public or community clubs. There's some at colleges and universities. There's advanced clubs for those who've been in Toastmasters a little bit longer and have made their way through the program. There's also clubs for leadership. Those are even more rare, like leaders of districts and stuff, people who've held various leadership roles. It's an advanced club, kind of, but for those who are leaders. Then there's specialty clubs. So for instance, I don't even know, I've read about some of them, like they're starting a Mandarin club, I want to say, an English Mandarin club here in the greater Boston area. Some of the international clubs have both English and the native language, and some alternate, like one meeting will be all in the native language, one will be all in English, and then the others might be a mix. So it's very interesting. I haven't visited any international clubs. A couple of my friends have, one of whom is actually fluent in Spanish. So it was very exciting for her to see. And hopefully she'll be on my podcast to talk about that eventually. Yes. She's going to fill out the form and we just schedule it. But she's like, I definitely want to be on. So that's good. Yeah. We have an international convention every year. I go to those. I went to one of those in person. Sorry. We have District 31 Toastmasters at district31.org. Serving most of Massachusetts, the eastern, as opposed to the westernmost. In all of Rhode Island, we have our annual in-person, virtual, hybrid, whatever you want to call it now, conference. It is hybrid. We do have a day in person. That is hybrid a little bit, but parts of it. The networking's not as hybrid, obviously, when you're in person and doing photo booths and whatnot, but it is a lot of fun. I've made a lot of friends. I got a work colleague out of it. Wasn't expecting that at all, but that's awesome. They actually they're one of my few sponsors of my podcast at the moment, and I'm working on getting more sponsors by one of my friends is a social media guru, and he gave me some tips, which, as you know, I followed up with you, and we compiled the list of facts about the podcast and some numbers and whatnot. And so I'm just working on that next. I was a little sidetracked last year because I spent 4 months over the summer studying for my real estate broker's license, which you start as a salesperson. And then once you've been in the industry working for 3 years, at least 25 hours a week, you're then eligible to go for your broker's license. And you know me, I just go for it. And that's the highest you can go. So I did that. And then 2 weeks later, as you know, I got COVID. So I had a few setbacks last year, but I think I'm doing a pretty good job of getting back on track. And where I expected to be 2 or 3 months ago, I am now. So I'm feeling pretty confident in my systems and doing what I want to be doing. And all these little behind the scenes things that I really wanted to get done in the fall and winter, but didn't quite get all of them done in the fall.
Well, the most important thing with any podcast I tell anybody is consistency, right? As long as you're consistent, as long as you hit your deadlines, it's okay to falter every now and then, but especially yours. Yours is a monthly podcast. You do not want to miss a month because people will just drop off, right? People are expecting an episode, they don't get it. They're going to forget about it, and they're going to fill something else to fill that time. Like mine's weekly, plus a bunch of other content I have. So if I miss a week, it's not the end of the world because I have so much goddamn content out there. Mm-hmm. It can fill the void.
You have a lot of content out there.
Yeah, but you always hit your deadlines. You never miss a month. So that's very, very important. Whose idea was the podcast? Was it you? You came to me, or did I go to you?
Well, here's the funny thing. I'll answer that in a second. But last summer, I was going to skip a month, and you're like, "Oh no, you're not." And I was like, "I'm studying, man. This is a little more important." Nope, you're not skipping a month. And I think that was like I was on the cusp of my 25th episode, and I was like, "Oh, that makes sense. I'm so close to 25, and that's like
a sign of a good producer, right here. I'll pat myself on the back for that one.
Go for it. Yeah, go for it. So what happened was, I started in Pathways back in the summer of 2020. Mm-hmm. I finished the old educational program, which we won't talk about. And since I got my Distinguished Toastmaster Award, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go through and order level 1, 2, 3. But let's find an elective that I can work on for work. So I went through, came up with like 5 or 6 electives, ran them by my dad, and he goes, podcast. Did you know William has a podcasting company? And I was like, well, I know he hosts a podcast. And then I reached out to you, and the rest is history.
Oh, well, there we go. Good old Uncle Jay, always looking out for me. So what's the best part? What's the most rewarding part about your podcast? From your experience, right? Someone who had no experience in it. Did you listen to podcasts here and there beforehand, or you something just brand new, hopped right into it from scratch?
Here and there. I originally wanted to do a blog. Like in the back of my mind for like a decade. I want to write a blog. And then I'm like, podcasts would be better because I can talk to people and be interactive.
Audio blog,
so,
yeah.
I think one of the best parts for me is interacting with people and getting to know them, learning their experiences. And there are a couple people who I didn't know, and I was like, in real life, we'd be friends. Like, let's stay in touch. Or they're like, hey, we need to be friends and stay in touch. So that's pretty cool. I remember finishing up with one woman, and I was like, I think this was one of my best interviews ever. And she's like, really? And I'm like, yeah, because she asked some great questions of me. Like, it was just really good. I was just like, wow. Not that any of them are any better than the others. I don't play favorites.
You can tell. Sometimes when you stop hitting record and you kind of just sit back, you know the good ones. The bad ones, but you also you definitely know the good ones. And sometimes what you think is bad gets released and it turns out to be really good. So sometimes the ones you think are bad are actually the better ones. So
it's interesting because of the numbers. Like we keep track. I'm a numbers person. If anybody hasn't figured that out yet, I'm a numbers person and a huge goal person. So like the 25th episode was a big one for me, and hitting numbers and stuff. And when you ever gave me the numbers, and I was like, Sean's episode is like one of the top 3 pretty consistently whenever you give me a number. And I was like, yeah, well, he was the first one, but then the rest of my top 5 are scattered.
Yeah, they're all scattered. It's weird. Sometimes also numbers, people tell me about numbers all the time. It's very difficult to get accurate numbers about podcasting. So like, that's just based off what I have. It could be more. It's hard to tell because it's on so many platforms. It has to aggregate through all these different platforms. Plus, I took the feed and distributed to some other platforms that weren't available through Anchor. So it's on more platforms. I just don't have access to those numbers. So it probably is more. There's just no way for me to actually know, and no way for me to actually know if these numbers are 100% accurate. So
okay, so I can just add plus to all of them.
Plus how many? I don't know. I would say probably add your average, right? Whatever your average is, it could be plus or minus that average. Right? Actually, no, don't be minus. It'll probably be plus because it is available more places. But the big ones are there: Apple, iTunes. Apple and iTunes is the same thing. Spotify, Google, Amazon. Those are the big platforms. You want to make sure you're there, which you are. And I would say those numbers are pretty accurate. So
yes, yeah. Spotify gave me some numbers last year at the end in December.
The Wrapped. Yeah.
Oh my God, that was amazing.
The Wrapped is pretty cool.
So now when people ask, I'm like, wherever you listen to podcasts, including but not limited to this, and Spotify.
Yeah,
I always put Spotify in.
Well, the goal should be like, right? Because like, how do you listen to podcasts? What platform do you use?
Me?
Yeah, you.
Personally?
Yeah, if you listen to a podcast, what platform do you go to?
I kind of actually go to wherever the podcast is. Like if someone has a platform, like for yours, I like to watch them and listen, go back and forth. So I go to YouTube and get your playlist.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm not like registered on any of the other of the platforms or whatever. So I could listen to one on Spotify or just go to someone's, and wherever it's hosted, that's where I am. Because I've listened to 4 or 5 other podcasts before I even started podcasting. And
right.
I probably have about a dozen or so, maybe 15 in my podcast saved folder.
So you go to wherever you find it first.
Yeah. Like
so usually it's probably their website then.
Yeah, like their website.
Like website or YouTube. Okay, interesting. So you were the first person to ever tell me that. Because, and I mentioned this to everybody because people listen to podcasts differently, right? I listen to all of my podcasts on Stitcher because I have Android. It's an Android app. And I like the way it's organized. I can download things. Like I just like how it's very user friendly to what I like, right? Most people, iTunes or Spotify, normal. Other people, one guy used Google. I said, okay, cool. You're that one person who uses Google Podcasts. Congratulations. You prefer the website or you prefer YouTube. So that's very fascinating. I did not know that, but I'm glad I know someone actually looks out for websites. Because it's like, I get why people put it on the website, but it's like for me, I'm never going to sit on your website where that you is and watch your podcast. I'll find it where I find it.
Well, you want to hear something else?
Please.
I like to listen from the very first episode.
Oh, so when you find one, you start back at the beginning?
Yep. I'm a little weird like that.
Oh, no, I get that. I did see during COVID, I did that with the Lord of the Rings YouTube channel. Shout out Men of the West. They're a phenomenal YouTube channel. This Lord of the Rings history and lore channel. And like I watched a few of his videos and I was like, I gotta go back to the beginning. I won't do that for podcasts typically, unless they're a narrative based. A lot of the podcasts I listen to are topical, but if they're narrative based and I can go back to the beginning, or they're just like science or whatever, I can go back to the beginning. But sometimes it's hard because sometimes they have years and years and years of catalogs. Like me, my catalog was a year. 2021 is the first Talking with Tarashka episode. So I'm glad you like it.
50 something?
You're gonna be 53.
Oh God.
So
yeah, I think I've listened to about 15 or 16 of yours. I know my cousin Michael was 19. I did skip around a little bit.
That's fine. Yeah. Well, that's the point, right? My podcast is designed to skip around a little bit.
But that's what? I'm loving it because you're like bringing me into your world. And so I'm learning more about you. Like you've interviewed a couple of your former colleagues. Luke, you guys gave me a shout out on Luke's.
Yep.
Because he does the editing for my podcast. I'm sure there's going to be other people. Mr. Fretz, I think it was.
Mr. Fretz. Yeah. Canadian.
Yes. That was hilarious. Because he's like, how'd you think I was a science teacher?
I don't know. The name Mr. Fretz. We were live. The name Fretz came up. And I was like, sounds like a science teacher.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I was watching Breaking Bad. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I don't know. It sounds sciencey a little bit, I guess.
Yeah. Fretz.
Yeah.
James Fretz.
It's very interesting. I'm playing with my hair again. But actually, one of my friends who is a runner, and she does these long distance things. She actually was on my podcast. Shout out to Shannon, one of my first guests, one of my early guests. She said, "Oh, I downloaded a couple of your episodes to listen to while I'm running." And I'm like, "You what?" I'm like, I don't download a podcast episode to my phone. I'm like, that's something else to figure out later. But I thought that was interesting. I'm like, so she downloaded it, probably listened to like 3 or 4 episodes and probably played them over and over because she was just running. I was like, that's interesting. Maybe that's why she has so many listens. I'm kidding.
Do you hear a lot about people in real life like mentioning like Toastmasters, right? You go to a meeting from Toastmasters or something. Do they bring it up?
Not usually.
Here and there, because that's a weird thing, right? Because I make a lot of posts on LinkedIn because you have to, and it's annoying. But a lot of a lot of people who I would not think or like looking at them or watching them go up to me in like in real life and go, "Hey, man, you know, pat on the back or whatever. Nice job," right? That's weird. That's still a little weird to me. Like people just telling me about the podcast in real life. It's awkward. It's very awkward. People tell me they like the podcast. I don't know why. It's just a weird will thing. Like someone tell me like they listen to it, they enjoy it, and back when my comments like, why?
Well, I know some of my friends, especially the ones who've been on, have listened to several of my podcasts or most of my episodes. Like some of my early friends, they were like, yeah, I'm listening to all of them. And I don't know if they dropped off or whatnot, but that was helpful. And it was nice to know that at least they were listening.
Yeah.
You know, I know your mom said she listens to all your podcasts. And I was like, does she listen to all of mine? I forgot to ask her. But I think she had said she was going to listen to mine. So that's cool. It's cool when family members are like, hey, I listened to a couple episodes of your podcast. Like, thanks for the support. I appreciate it.